Good morning and welcome to the Mega News, the 6 News coming to you live from our studios on the 10th Avenue Extension, Great Estate in Nwa at Dogono. But first, let's take a look at the headlines.
Mahama reassigns Broja Jemfi, Pelpo moved to special initiatives. In business, 56.4% of Guineans remain in poverty, World Bank. And on the international front, Nigeria launches operations to rescue over 500 kidnapped victims.
This and many other stories coming up in the next. My name is El Samuels. The news is also live across our social media handles on MBN 360. We'll be right back with the details. Now, the details of the story. The President, John Dramani Mahama, has made further changes to his administration, with Deputy Defense Minister NX Broja Jemfi removed from the Ministry of Defense and reassigned to the presidency as an advisor on national resilience and emergency preparedness.
Broja Jemfi had served as Deputy Minister for Defense since his appointment in March 2025. In a separate change, the Minister of State in charge of Special Initiatives, Emmanuel Ejekum, has also been removed from his position to head the Ministry of Labour, Jobs and Employment, while Dr. Abdul Rashid Hassan Pelpo replaces him. This is the second ministerial reshuffle of President Mahama's current second term after the first was announced on August 7, 2026. The August 7 reshuffle saw reassignments and new ministerial nominations made, including the reassignment of Kenneth Gilbert Ajay from the Ministry of Works, Housing and Water Resources to the Ministry of Defense. Ahmed Ibrahim was also moved from Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs to take over the Works, Housing and Water Resources portfolio.
Now, moving on, the Special Prosecutor Kesi Ajaben has named 5 persons of interest in the Ghanaian dimension of the bribery case involving former Goldman Sachs banker and the Tema Oil Refinery Director Asante Kweku Beku.
The persons identified by the Special Prosecutor are former Power Minister Kwabena Donko, Francis Watson Kwesi Jaffa, a former technical advisor to the Minister of Power Solomon Ajite Sowa, a Deputy Director Lyndon Metal, Director of Tricorp Group Limited, and Bafo and Kuma Brobe, an employee of Tricorp Group Limited. The announcement follows Beko's conviction by a federal jury in Brooklyn, New York on August 6, 2026 over his role in a scheme involving more than $1 million in bribes to Ghanaian officials in connection with the development and financing of a power plant. The project involved Turkish energy company AXA Energy and the government of Ghana. The United States prosecution established that Beko and his co-conspirators discussed and made payments intended to influence Ghanaian officials and secure approvals for the power project. U.S. prosecutors said the scheme operated between 2014 and 2015 during a period of severe power shortages in Ghana. According to evidence presented in the U.S. proceedings, Beko and his associates discussed a payment of $1 million to the then Minister of Power, who had responsibility for key approvals required to advance the project. The case materials also refer to payments involving other Ghanaian officials and persons connected to the Ministry of Power, as well as payments associated with a trip by Ghanaian officials to Turkey to inspect equipment for the proposed plant. The identities of some of the Ghanaian officials referenced in the U.S. court proceedings were not publicly disclosed in the case materials, which described them by the labels such as Ghana Official 1 and Ghana Official 2. The OSP says its works on the matter did not end with providing assistance to the U.S. investigators. Kisi Ajiben said the office has continued investigating the Ghanaian dimension and intends to pursue the matter on the basis of evidence obtained through its investigations.
The conviction of Asante Kwaku Bekum in the United States does not provide automatic basis for the prosecution of identified persons who acted with him under Ghanaian law. The circumstances of the case are such that the actions of Bekum may not necessarily establish culpability in other persons under Ghanaian law. The OSP will not prosecute a person solely on the basis that a person's name appears in proceedings conducted in another country. Equally, the OSP will not hesitate to prosecute such persons where the evidence establishes a proper basis for so proceeding. As I stated earlier, we have been carefully investigating the Ghana dimension, and our public silence has not meant inaction. Our involvement with the case and the evidence so far enable us to identify the following as the main persons of interest in this case. 1. Kwabena Donko, who was at all times the Minister of Power. 2. Francis Walkson Kwesi Jata, at all times the technical advisor to the Minister of Power. 3. Solomon Ajete Sowa, at all times a deputy director at the Ministry of Power. Lyndon George Nisor Metal, at all times a director at Tricop Group Limited. And Bafo Ankuma Brobe, at all times an employee at Tricop Group Limited. These are our main persons of interest for the time being. Other persons of interest include some present and former employees of Volta River Authority, Ghana Great Company Limited, Electricity Company of Ghana, Public Utilities and Regulatory Commission, and some staff of the entity formerly known as the Ministry of Power. Please bear in mind, and this point should be strongly emphasized, that the person of interest is not necessarily a suspect. The two categories, person of interest and suspect, are distinct investigative classifications and should not be treated as interchangeable. Then again, identification in either category does not constitute criminal culpability or conviction until guilt is proved beyond reasonable doubt to the satisfaction of a court of competent jurisdiction. So, we should be circumspect as to how we report this announcement and how we treat the named persons of interest.
And still with the Office of the Special Prosecutor, Kisi Ajiben has credited the revival and operationalization of the Tema Oil Refinery to an intervention by the Office of the Special Prosecutor.
According to him, the OSP's efforts helped safeguard the state-owned refinery from being sold, paving the way for its return to operations after years of inactivity. Addressing the press on Wednesday, August 26th, Kisi Ajiben said the OSP's intervention in the energy sector was among several measurable outcomes of the anti-corruption agency's work. The OSP also safeguarded Tema Oil Refinery from being pawned off, and it is now in operation after years of inactivity. This was the OSP's work. The President, John Dramani Mahama, announced on February 27, 2026 that TOR had been fully operationalized with crude oil processing resuming for the first time since 2018. The revival of the refinery was presented as a major development in Ghana's energy sector, with expectations of strengthening domestic fuel production and reducing the country's dependence on imported petroleum products. Mr. Agyeben also highlighted other recoveries and interventions by the OSP, including 8.5 million Ghana cedis and $2 million in financial recoveries by December 2025, as well as more than 100 million Ghana cedis reportedly saved through reforms to the government payroll system. He maintained that the agency's intervention had generated measurable and verifiable outcomes, arguing that its work had saved the country resources far exceeding the funding allocated to its establishment. Criticism is legitimate, scrutiny is necessary. However, they must be based on facts and not on baseless dismissiveness, he added.
Our performance is neither shrouded in secrecy nor obscurity. We pride ourselves with openness. As at 31 December 2025, the OSP was conducting the prosecution of 33 persons and had 79 cases at full investigation stage and 161 other cases at the preliminary investigation level. The OSP had secured 7 convictions at the same time through court-sanctioned plea bargains. The performance ledger transcends convictions and cases under investigation. Our mandate is not only in respect of investigations and prosecutions. It includes the recovery of assets and taking steps to prevent corruption. And by December 2025, the OSP had secured financial recoveries including 8.5 million cedis and $2 million, in addition to substantial movable and immovable assets in ongoing proceedings. The OSP has saved the nation billions of dollars in its work in the assessment of the risk of corruption, especially in relation to our natural resources and the potential loss of sovereignty over same, and our seaports. The OSP also safeguarded Tema Oil Refinery from being pawned off, and it is now in operation after years of inactivity. This was the OSP's work. The OSP's intervention in the customs sector has led to a reimagination and institution of a more robust auction of items system and a huge reduction in the often abused customs advance ruling regime in aid of the recouping of more revenue. The OSP's shake-up of the government payroll system has saved the nation a little over 100 million cedis so far. The OSP has saved the nation more than 20-fold the total amount of money released to its census establishment, and it has thereby fully paid for and far above the resources invested in it. No person, whether in the public or private space, now engages in corruption lightly. This is because such acts have become costly as a result of the operations of the OSP. These are measurable outcomes. These are verifiable outcomes. Criticism is legitimate. Scrutiny is necessary. However, they must be based on facts and not on baseless dismissiveness. The performance of the OSP should not be measured by political applause, social media volume, the preferences of persons affected by its work, or the preferences of those who dislike the institution and its officers out of sheer ill will. It should be gauged by investigations undertaken, persons prosecuted, assets recovered, losses prevented, systems corrected, public funds saved, and steps taken to prevent corruption. So when next it is said that the OSP has not performed, the answer is straightforward. Check the statistics and benchmark them against your preferred alternative. That is to say, no matter how much you disapprove of the DICA, acknowledge its notable speed and swiftness.
And as the major stories are from the office of the OSP, we go for a break. When we return, we'll bring you business and international stories. On the business desk, the World Bank says 56.4% of Ghanaians remains in poverty despite recent economic growth, with widening spatial disparities, highlighting a disconnect between a headline economic performance and living conditions.
Speaking at the launch of the World Bank Group's 10th Ghana Economic Update, World Bank Division Director for Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone, Dr. Robert Taliesio O'Brien, said the country's growth has yet to translate into broad-based improvements in living standards. 56.4% of Ghanaians remain in poverty and spatial disparities are widening, Dr. Taliesio O'Brien said. He said the situation reflects a gap between the economy's headline growth figures and experiences of a large section of the population, a disconnect between the headline growth that is yet to reach most of the population, he remarked. According to the World Bank, another challenge is the structure of Ghana's economic growth, which is being driven by sectors that have limited capacity to absorb workers. Dr. Taliesio O'Brien said this poses a growing challenge as Ghana's young population continues to enter the labor market. Growth is led by sectors with limited employment absorption relative to its growing young population entering the labor market in the next decade, he said. He described the situation as a structural imbalance that also demands urgent attention.
Recovery from 2022 crisis is real and measurable, but it also raises a harder question. Is it built to last? The choices made now will determine whether the gains of the past 2 years translate into durable transformation or prove fragile in the face of the next shock. The key results speak for themselves, and let me just highlight a few really notable accomplishments. Growth. The economy grew by 6% in 2025, the fastest pace since 2019, before the pandemic, and accelerated further to 6.4% in Q1 2026. Inflation. Headline inflation fell from 23.2% in February 2025 to 3.2% in March 2026. This is the lowest inflation rate since 1999 and currently stands at 4.6%, still below the Bank of Ghana's lower band target. The IMF program. Ghana successfully concluded its extended credit facility program, a hard-won marker of restored credibility. Fiscal, a primary surplus of 2.5% of GDP in 2025, which exceeded the 1.5% target, with continued momentum in the first half of 2026. Debt. Public debt declined from 70.3% of GDP in 2024 to 49% at the end of 2025, 3 years ahead of the expected IMF program timeline. And then the external position. International reserves have been rebuilt on the back of a strong trade surplus, driven by record gold export receipts. A welcome buffer, the one that underscores the economy's continued dependence on commodity exports. So the government deserves full credit for the difficult decisions that made these results possible. Yet the report is candid. Ghana is not out of the woods yet. The recovery remains structurally incomplete. The fiscal surplus was achieved largely through expenditure compression. Capital spending was 38% below budget, which is not a sustainable path to growth and development. The report offers a clear message. Sustained fiscal consolidation over the medium term will require strengthening revenue mobilization. Domestic revenue mobilization has been a challenge for Ghana for a very long time. Secondly, 56.4% of Ghanaians remain in poverty. 56.4% of Ghanaians remain in poverty. And spatial disparities are widening. A disconnect between the headline growth that is yet to reach most of the population. Thirdly, growth is led by...
From the business desk, we go straight to the forum. From precisely West African Nigeria President Bola Tinubu has ordered a manhunt for armed kidnappers who launched deadly attacks on 4 villages in a remote part of Niger State last Friday.
Residents told the BBC several mosques are simultaneously targeted during prayers. A local youth leader says many as 500 people may have been abducted, though this has not been verified. The president's orders came after the kidnappers posted a video on social media of what they said were those abducted last week sitting in a forest. The authorities had previously suspected the attackers were bandits, criminal gangs involved in kidnapping and looting for ransom across parts of Nigeria. No ransom demands have been reported. The gunmen, reportedly dressed in military-style clothing, attacked the villages of Dekera, Gidan-Zana, Zabon-Gida and Masaka. Police spokesman Wasui Abiodun told the BBC that more than 40 people were killed, but the exact number of deaths had not been confirmed. Looking at the footage released on social media, the local youth leader, who has not been named, said he recognized several individuals from his community. I was able to identify many people. There is an elderly man in the video who is like a grandfather to us, he said. He lives in Gidan-Zana village. He said families who had spotted relatives in the video were relieved to know they were still alive. At least they know where their loved ones are and hope they may be rescued, unlike those who still have no information about missing relatives, he added. A local blogger familiar with the area told the BBC that many residents had fled their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring states or across the border in Benin. Some survivors are receiving hospital treatment, including people with serious injuries. A local official also told the BBC that the attackers planted improvised explosive devices in parts of the affected communities as they led abductees into the forest. He said a teenage boy was killed when an explosive detonated as he tried to escape. In a statement issued by presidential spokesman Bayo Onanuga, Tinubu condemned the killings and abductions and vowed that those responsible would be brought to justice. Those who carried out this cowardly attack of defenseless Nigerians are enemies of peace and enemies of humanity, who will not go scot-free, the statement said. The president also expressed his condolences to the families of those killed. The attack is the latest sign of worsening insecurity in the Bagu area, which borders Kebbi and Kwara states as well as neighboring Benin. Earlier this month, police said 145 people had been rescued after being abducted from 4 other villages in the area. Local officials have also raised concerns about the growing presence of jihadist groups operating parts of northwestern Nigeria and along the border region, saying some fighters have recently entered communities and imposed religious restrictions on residents.
And with that adoption story from Nigeria, we come to the end of this morning's mega news on MBN TV. But before we take leave of you with second look at the stories making headlines.
Mahama reassigns Broja Jemfi, Pelpo moved to special initiatives. In business, 56.4% of Guineans remain in poverty, World Bank. And on the international front, Nigeria launches operations to rescue over 500 kidnapped victims.
For more news, thanks for joining us. For more news, log on to MBN 360. My name is El Samuels. Up next is a sports update. Good morning.